This tribal mindset now go into the internet, go into the Western spaces, and people operating as if they're part of a tribe. And this tribal mindset then wants to subvert or dismantle certain institutions. So yeah, bro, tell us about your experience from childhood to now, and leading into why you decided to create your channel.
You really see it in comic book culture, which is the culture I've been a part of since I was a child. And growing up and watching it change essentially for the worse over the years really just made me want to do something about it and to implement a culture shift that would steer us back in the right direction. You nailed it with tribalism, and that tribalism has seriously infected pretty much every aspect of life and every aspect of American society, because people are so quick to categorize you as something. What you have to do is, or what I believe you have to do is to return to that foundational mythology that started your nation or your people or whoever it may be, and really reconnect with what the values of the story, what the values within the stories we tell are. So I named my channel Modern Saviors, not because, I'm trying to be savior of the world or anything, but because within the current stories that we tell of heroes, they get their inspiration from somewhere. We didn't, Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster and all the other creators after them, they didn't come up with Superman out of nowhere. They had archetypes, they had prototypes, they had prerequisites that they followed and developed him from. And so if we can plug our superheroes in our comics, which is really our modern day mythology, if we can plug that back into the grander lexicon of human mythology, then we can reconnect to those lessons as well. Because think about in some archaeologist 1,000 years from now, our superheroes and the characters of all our comics, they will essentially be the ancient American gods. Just like we have the ancient Greek gods and the ancient Norse gods and all those other deities of polytheistic cultures, that's essentially what comic book characters will function as.
No, I recently saw this one video where this guy quoted a Islamic terrorist from a while ago, maybe in the early 2000s. And he said, we want to take our revenge on America. And the best way to do that would be to kill one of their heroes. But Americans don't have heroes. All their heroes are fictional. They have Superman, SpongeBob, and a bunch of others, And so you can't really strike at the heart of the people because, well, they're fictional. However, if that terrorist was in cahoots with the globalists and the cultural Marxists would have told him, oh no, we can strike at the heart. We can hurt their heroes, their fictional heroes. And the best way to do that is to subvert them.
Yeah, you make a great point. I knew exactly what you were referring to with the terrorist leader who said, who are America's heroes, Spider-Man or SpongeBob? And, on the surface, that sounds like he's taking a dig at America, but that is just the culture we've created. And you're absolutely right. They can strike at those heroes by emasculating them, by weakening them, by just corrupting them with this just pathetic enfeeblement that it makes them no longer be something to aspire to.
Let's quickly touch base on that, because I like Superman. I like some superheroes, but I would consider myself still a Christian. And if others were like, hey, you're committing idolatry here, you have other gods. Well, I don't worship Superman. I don't pray to him and stuff like that. But touch base on the differences there, just so people don't get confused as to like, okay, am I actually worshiping Superman? I'm not sure. Elaborate.
So obviously Christ is Lord because he is the only hero of history. Obviously he's God in the flesh. He's how God entered the world, of course. But he is really the only hero, or especially the only God that sacrificed something for you. The only God that offered something to you through personal loss of his own, which is why he is the Almighty, because of that benevolence. And so how we create a hero, and especially like a savior figure within their own mythology, like Superman is to American mythology, that savior figure has to be created by imitating the real hero, by imitating the real savior figure. So I don't see it as, blasphemy or idolatry or anything, because I've prayed about it several times. And what it is it's an imitation. There's a verse that slips my mind at the moment. I believe it was said by Paul. He said, "Imitate me as I imitate Christ," and so that is essentially what our heroes do. And then when we imitate our fictional heroes, as long as they're imitating Christ, we'll be on the right path because we're still following that path that He forged. We're just walking it with our own heroes, leading to the same destination. I really break this down in my video, The Brilliance of BVS in the Book of Luke, because that film is just eternally brilliant, and a lot of the story elements and a lot of the events that take place in that book or in that film are an imitation of the Gospel of Luke. They're retelling that same story just with their own characters in American mythology, which is what I deem DC Comics as. Joseph Campbell's The Power of Myth. He states that so few kings throughout history actually shared the noble qualities of the role they served. And the reason that society, or like a monarchy, kind of falls apart when the king is incompetent, is because the king is supposed to be the highest representation of the people themselves. And so what a mythology really is it's just a symbolic representation of the human experience. It's why we say the king lives in the high castle. I don't know how many of your listeners, or if you ever played the game Skyrim, but when you get to this village called Whiterun, you have to go all the way to the top of the hill where the big palace is so you can talk to the king, or the Jarl in that case. But the king is positioned at the physical top of his society because he is supposed to represent the ultimate will of the people. That's why you need a foundation or a supreme deity in your culture that is unmovable, that is everlasting. And so, to tie this back to comics and films, that is why heroes have to follow Christ, because He's the only unmoving, He's the only unshakable deity in all of mythology, theology, or religion, or all of it, all of human existence, because He is the only one that offers that path to heaven. That singularity is what ensures that stability. John 14:6 says that I am the only way to the Father. I say He's the most complex character in all of fiction because He is the primary myth. He's that supreme deity I was just mentioning of American mythology. He represents the messianic identity of America. He is a personification of that, which is why He's so physically powerful and is why He's so idealistically unwavering. That idealistic nature of America that Superman represents, which is what the American way is really about. Satan and the devil and whoever else, they exist as pure evil in order to differentiate good from it. Homelander is the personification of America's corrupted ideology when Christ is replaced with a different supreme deity such as money or fame. what it lacks is that aspiration we mentioned earlier. And forgive my vulgarity, but what it really lacks is that sense of like badass, you know? You got to have that to be something to aspire to. You have to want to be that hero. The newer Batman with Robert Pattinson's Batman, I feel like the bar was set a little too low, because it doesn't make me want to work to reach this unattainable goal of being Ben Affleck's Batman. And the reason that he is such a perfect example of heroism is because he, like I said earlier, he offers salvation for nothing in return. Jesus offers us salvation in the real world from eternal damnation if we choose to live eternity separate from God. Whereas in our fictional American mythology, Superman offers us salvation in BVS by preventing assured destruction. If anyone's watched, or if anyone does watch my video, Understanding Superman 2, The Man of Many Messiahs, in the later parts of that video, I include a quote from Bishop Mari Emanuel, and he says that Jesus is the only conqueror to ever rule the world without picking up a sword or without firing one bullet or anything like that. And he ruled with love, because love is that foundational ethic. It's the foundation mythology for society, because that's when God came down to essentially show us how it's done. And then we see that imitated once again in our modern myths. We see that imitated once again with our modern saviors, with Superman in Action Comics 1040, like 1041, 1042, where Superman is on War World, and he's trying to liberate the slaves of War World from this brutal planet which is ruled by the tyrant Mongol. And he's trying to preach to these people, essentially, love your enemies. He's saying no life is worth more or less than another. And he frees these slaves without like picking up a sword, without really fighting with anything besides his fist, which I guess is like the clean way to fight. So he's teaching them that exact same ethic of love thy enemies in that comic. And what he does is he completely overthrows that totalitarian society and reinvents it with the foundation of loving your enemies. It's a subsect of Satanism that has been presented to be heroic. They say power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely, but what does absolute tolerance look like? Because once you get to a point of absolute tolerance, just anything goes. You have to have some sort of line that is drawn where you say, no, we'll allow this, but this is not accepted. You have to draw that line, and you have to have threshold guardians. Luke chapter 23, we receive, and we indeed justly, for we receive the due reward of our deeds. Mike Tyson quote, where he's saying, if you're favored by God, you're also favored by the devil. Whenever I make a decision for anything in life, I always stop and think, what is the alternative of this decision? You really just have to pick a side that more aligns with what you want for the future. We still fight the same enemies that the Lord fought. And so to make his sacrifice anything worthwhile, we have to uphold it. Which, now that I say that, that is exactly why the Justice League came together in Zack Snyder's Justice League after Superman's sacrifice in Batman v Superman. For his sacrifice to mean anything, you have to keep fighting for the good against the literal entities of hell that invaded Earth. Wonder Woman is the American god of war, because everybody talks about how she's this advocate for peace and this ambassador for peace between nations and all that, but she carries a sword. She carries her sword because that is what is required to implement peace. Nobody ever said it would be easy. Christ even says, pick up your cross and follow me. His cross was like 250 pounds, somewhere in that range. That's not going to be easy to do. So we just have to fight regardless. Because the alternative, the other side of that duality, is just to let the evil win. they're scared of how powerful they actually are. And once you start to realize how powerful you are, you get that burden of responsibility in order to handle it. You'll go through hardships, you'll have to put up with hard work, but it's really just a test of strength. It's like Jor-El says in Man of Steel, the only way to know how strong you are is to keep testing your limits. And so you see, like on Twitter, all these like Trad West accounts or whatever it may be, posting all these Christian memes saying, in the end we win, in the end we win. And I hate it every time I see that, because I always think you still have to fight. What you just said is basically the reason I exist at all. Like, I am the counter. I exist as that counter product. I exist as the end result of the hubris of people that have corrupted these once just elegant and epic stories. You know, that's part of the mission. If I can turn one non-believer into a believer, then I'm a success. The people that suggest that Superman should be happy all the time and smiling 24/7, like, that's ridiculous, because Superman, being the strongest being in the world, being that modern day Atlas holding up the sky, you know, he's going to take on the most burden of responsibility. So therefore, like, he's going to have some pretty dark times. That's another one of the reasons that I named my channel what I did, is back to what I said earlier. If I even convert one non-believer, then I'm a success, because that one converted non-believer, he is now a modern savior. I have this theory that evil doesn't ever change, but our heroes do. Our heroes all have their own identity, but evil is the same everywhere you go. So we'll just have to fight it wherever we find it.
Pacientia fortitudo